Kind of sad.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم ما بعد فقال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد في سورة الفتح أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum, respected brothers and sisters, youngsters and elders. I recited to you the beginning verse of Surah Al-Fatih. And although it's a shorter verse of the Quran, although it may not have explicit fiqhi rulings that can be extracted from it, this is actually a very powerful verse because of the history behind it, the sabab al-nuzul behind it, the reason of the revelation, and the implications it had at that time and afterwards. So I'm going to explain a little bit the history behind it, what led up to it, and then the implications it had and how it relates to us, inshallah. And in order to do that, we have to revisit the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he received revelation at the age of 40. And for the first few years, the first 3 years or so, his message was to his close family and relatives. So we have Khadija radiallahu anha, we have Abu Bakr radiallahu anha, we have Ali radiallahu anha, we have this close family and close friends, this core, this solid core. And after this first few years of da'wah, of spreading the message within his close relatives, his close friends, the inner circle, the core, he was told to take the message public. And for the next few years, that's what he did. And so that's where you hear the stories that he would go to the busy portion of the city. He would tell people publicly. He would reach out to the chieftains of the tribe. But this was not without any repercussions, as we know. This was very different from the lifestyle that the Makkans were used to pray to only one God. And they accepted Allah. But along with Allah, they said that there were other gods or helpers that helped him, that aided him. And we know that this is blasphemous. Allah has no helpers. Allah is able to do whatever He wants, without any kind of help. So this did not sit well with the Makkans. And at first there was just ridicule against the Muslims, the early Muslims. And eventually it went from ridicule to laughter to mocking the Prophet ﷺ, to slandering the Muslims and to slandering the Prophet. And then it went even further to violence. And then it even went further to just outright murder and assassination attempts against the life of the Prophet and torture to the Muslims. I mean, if we read the books of Sirah, we can read these narrations of how Sahaba Karam in the early days were whipped, were tortured, had burning coals put on them, had their tongues cut off. So these narrations are there, and this was all-out torture against the Muslims and all-out persecution. And when that wasn't enough, they literally just started boycotting them. That they were put in a certain area of the greater Makkah area, and they were boycotted altogether. That we don't want anything to do with these people. And they were cut off from the rest of society, and they were cut off from trade and from all of these other things. And this happened for almost 4 years. And during this time, this was when the Prophet ﷺ started looking at other places. He was a great thinker, and he started looking at other options. And you have to realize this is after the age of 50. How long was he in Mecca? For 13 years. So at the end of all this, he's past the age of 50. His followers and companions have been tortured and killed. His daughter and some of his close companions had to flee to East Africa and seek refuge there. And the people that remain are being all out boycotted altogether. And there are some narrations that say that during that time, you could hear the cries of little children going to sleep hungry because their mothers weren't able to afford to feed them. Afterwards, we know what happened. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted permission to flee to Medina. We know even before that the first Aqaba and the second Aqaba people came from Medina, pledged allegiance to the Prophet, and that he sent with them a couple companions to teach them about Islam. And we know that the time eventually came where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to migrate to Medina, and he was welcomed there with open arms, more or less. And from there, you would think that it stopped, that the Meccans would stop there. But no, it didn't stop right there. From there, we know that there were assassination attempts again they tried to wage war against the people of Medina, and more or less the people would not leave him alone. They were not happy that his message of Islam had spread to Medina, that he has now been established as the leader of Medina, and that there's a much larger population that's following him. And there's countless wars. Badr, Uhud, Khandaq. So there was multiple wars waged against them. That, okay, you were able to get away from us, but now we're going to obliterate you and your entire following. So this happened for many, many years. And after the Prophet moved to Medina, in the sixth year, he told his companions that we will now go for Umrah. And I want you to understand this for a second. The Meccans had a very big responsibility as keepers of the house. This was something they took great pride in. There was actual fights that took place over who was going to do what role for the Kaaba and the pilgrims. One of the ancestors of the Prophet ﷺ, his name was Qusay. He had received that name, Qusay, because he would kind of just pound the dough and make it ready, make it edible. You know, when you're pounding the dough and you're kind of mixing everything all together, the water and the flour, and you're making it nice and doughy, and you're preparing the dough to cook it. So he was given this name Qusay because he would kind of prepare that dough and make it ready for the pilgrims and then feed the pilgrims, amongst other things. There was also watering the pilgrims, and there was also holding the flag, the flag bearer. These were just some of the responsibilities that the Meccans took great pride in. So when pilgrims would come to the house of Allah, it was a great honor for them, a great pride for them, and they fed them and they watered them. And they welcomed them. So this was the mindset they had for generations. And actually, the son of Qusay Abd Manaf had a fight with his brother Abd Dar after the passing of his father of who would take what role. And they were very close to actually having a full-out fight, brother, against who's going to do this, about who's going to do these roles. And eventually a peace treaty was agreed upon. And Abd Manaf gave birth or had a child named Hashim, who had a child named Shayba, Abdul Muttalib, who had a child named Abdullah, who had the Prophet ﷺ. So this was from the lineage of the Prophet. But anyways, this great honor that has been happening for generation after generation, you would assume that it would continue. And for the most part, it did. But when the Prophet ﷺ told his companions in the 6th year after Hijrah that we will go there, they got together a caravan and they started going there. And the Meccans found out about this. And they were very conflicted. On one end, you have a group of people who wanted to come and perform their rites to the house of Allah. But on the other hand, these were the Muslims. They didn't want to remain. And so what ended up happening was when they were on the outskirts of Mecca, when the Muslims were on the outskirts of Mecca, a delegation had been sent out to meet the Muslims. And some of the narrations even say that when the delegation came to the Muslims, they actually surrounded them, kind of like in a menacing way. You know, when horses are surrounding you and circling you, it's in a kind of menacing sort of manner to show off their strength and their power. And the Prophet ﷺ told them to look at how we are dressed. We're not coming as an army. We're not coming to attack you. Look at how we are dressed. And they were dressed in ihram. They were dressed in ihram, indicating that they sought no violence. They sought no altercation. They wanted to come here, perform their rites to the house of Allah, and leave. But they were not allowed to go further. The delegation that had been sent by the Meccans said that you cannot go any further. But at the same time, they realized that this is something that has never happened in Jazirah al-Arab. when a group of people, when a caravan, when a delegation is coming for the sole purpose of Umrah or Hajj, they are always welcomed there. That was the tradition. Welcomed, watered, fed, taken care of. So what ended up happening was they sent a representative. The Muslims sent a representative, Uthman radiallahu anhu, to go and negotiate with the Muslims, with the Meccans. And while they were negotiating, the rest of the Muslims were to stay where they were, locked off by the delegation of the Meccans. So Uthman radiallahu anhu agreed and he went there. And he told the leaders of Makkah that this is what we're here for, we're not seeking any violence, etc., etc. And so, the Makkans, the leaders of Makkah, they said, okay, we are going to discuss this between ourselves, and while we're waiting, you can just, if you want, while you're waiting, you can go and do a quick round around the Kaaba. Just as a notion of go ahead. We're going to discuss this, we're going to negotiate this, we're going to look at this, but while we're waiting, since you're here, go ahead. Do a round around the Kaaba if you want. And here's where you look at the love of the Sahaba Karam. Uthman radiallahu anhu said that I will not do tawaf if the Prophet does not do tawaf. He is our leader. If he is not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And that actually sort of angered the Meccans, that you're taking our hospitality for granted. And they actually took him and locked him up. And as you all might realize and know, how rumors spread and travel and morph, that's exactly what happened. So Uthman was in a locked room waiting for the verdict of the leaders of Makkah, what to do, if they will be allowed or not allowed. And the rumors began to warp and morph into something it wasn't. And by the time it reached the Prophet ﷺ, it was the Meccans have killed Uthman. They took him away, they tortured him, they killed him. And the Prophet ﷺ gathered the companions and told them that if this is true, measures need to be taken. There will be consequences. There will be retaliation. And he sought allegiance. He sought that the Sahaba give him allegiance again. And the Quran makes reference of this in Surah Al-Fath. That the believers lined up rank upon rank and gave allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. This is mentioned in Surah Al-Fath. But as we know, when they were preparing to do all of this, when they had given their oath and they were making preparation, they saw that there was people coming from a distance, and amongst them was Uthman radiallahu anhu in the distance, and they found that this rumor was actually false. But he wasn't alone. He was with some other people, some of the higher ups, the leaders of Makkah. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if they come with a tree, I'm ready to take it. I'm ready to take it today. Not because he was the smaller of the two groups, because he was perhaps on a worldly level the weaker of the two groups in terms of strength and power and military power, but because he was a great thinker and he knew what needed to be done. For the better of the two parties, he knew what needed to be done. So when they came, they said that we have come to a consensus and we are willing to make a treaty with you guys. And this was known as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And what ended up happening was that in this treaty, there were some very not so fair requirements made on the part of the Muslims. Meaning that the Meccans said that you will not be allowed to do perform your rites this year in Baytullah, you have to come again next year. And again, I want you to remember what I told you earlier. This shook the believers, because never before in the history of the Arabian Peninsula were a delegation in Ihram were they ever stopped and told you are not allowed to enter, come back next year. It did not happen. It was against their norms and their culture. It was a shock for them. A very bitter pill to swallow. And not only that, in addition to that, if a believer was to leave Makkah and flee to Medina, they must be returned to Makkah. However, if a person was to leave Medina and seek refuge from the leaders of Makkah, they do not need to be returned to Medina. Another not so fair component of the treaty. And another component was that the Muslims, the people of Medina and the people of Makkah will not wage war with each other for the next 10 years. And not only that, the allies of the Muslims in Medina, as well as the allies of the people of Makkah, will not attack each other or one another. And this was a part of the agreement that the Prophet thought and knew to be very important, and he told them to sign the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Meaning he agreed to their terms and conditions, even though their terms and conditions were not very fair and greatly favored the Meccans. And as you can imagine, the Sahaba Kiram were not in the best of spirits after this, because these were the people, the Meccans were the people that had tortured them, that had ridiculed them, that had killed some of them, that had tortured them, that had waged war against them, that had forced them to flee out of Mecca to places like Africa, to places like Medina. And now all of a sudden, when they have autonomy and they're coming here to do nothing but perform their rights, they were not only refused, but also told to agree to a treaty where the conditions were against them. Umar actually famously said that aren't we on the haqq and aren't they on wrong? So why don't we stand here and fight them? You know, there's these famous sayings that have been preserved that you can look at in the books of Sirah, where the Sahaba were ready to fight and die for their cause because they knew they were on the haqq. And so, the Prophet ﷺ forbade them to do so, and he told them something that they had never seen before. To exit out of the state of Ihram, that their sacrifice has been accepted, shave their heads, and exit out of the state of Ihram without ever actually seeing the Kaaba. It was a shock for them. And actually, there's some narrations that say that when he said this, nobody did it. Nobody moved. They were just in shock. Never before has that happened. That a group of people came and without ever seeing the Kaaba, shaved their heads and exit out of the state of Ihram. And so he retreated to his own tent, and he asked one of his wives, Salama, radiallahu anha, and she said that, lead by example, Ya Rasulullah. We are not bad people, we are just in shock. When they see you do it, they will follow. And that's exactly what happened. The Prophet ﷺ did it himself, and he exited out of the state of Ihram, and that's when the believers knew that they were really not moving forward and they needed to do the same. And so they did the same. And they began to pack everything together. They slaughtered their animals and began to pack everything together, and they made their way back to Medina. But as you can imagine, this didn't seem like a win for them. Their spirits were pretty low. They had come to do Umrah. They had never seen the Kaaba. They were forced to agree to a treaty in which the terms and conditions were not fair, were outright blasphemous, and favored the Meccans. And now they were told to go back to Medina. And so this was not a very, I guess you can say, happy moment for them. They didn't seem like they got the better end of the stick. And actually, Umar, who had famously had stated that we should fight them, that we are on the haqq and they are not, he narrates that usually the Prophet ﷺ, when they were traveling, he travels in the back. But Umar was so upset internally at what had transpired that he was even behind the Prophet, kind of just dragging along. At the end of the caravan, just barely there, not really wanting to be there, I guess. And Umar said that I saw the signs of revelation upon the Prophet. He was ahead of me, riding his camel, and I saw the signs of revelation. And he bowed his head. And Umar said that I feared that revelation would be against me. Because I had spoken out to the Prophet and said that no, we should fight. I should have listened right away to what the Prophet said, but I had spoken out, and I was afraid that the revelations would be about me had I not been so insignificant to God. Had I been a bit more significant, then the revelations would have been about me, and he would have instructed the Prophet to punish me. But on the contrary, the revelations came down, and the Prophet ﷺ turned first to Umar and told him the revelations that came down. And it was this verse. إِنَّ فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا. That truly, we have granted you a clear victory, an open victory. Meaning there's no doubt that you guys are the ones who are victorious. And this was to remove the doubt, the shak, and the overall low feeling that they were feeling at that time. Did we really win? What did we just get ourselves into? What did we just agree to? Why didn't we get to perform our rights? And as they're going away with this overwhelming feeling, this verse was revealed, indicating that you guys are actually the ones who are victorious. And we know from this treaty, from Hudaybiyah, not only were the people of Medina able to perform their Umrah the next following year, in the 7th year after Hijri, but also because of this treaty, it paved the way to Fateh Makkah, the conquest of Makkah, which eventually gave Makkah back into the hands of the Muslims. Because what ended up happening was that one of the tribes that were allies to Makkah, the Banu Bakr, they attacked one of the tribes that were allies to Medina. And they obliterated them. And a couple of the people came and complained to the Prophet that we were promised asylum with you. And this is what the Banu Bakr did. And the Prophet ﷺ gathered everyone together, the people of Medina, the allies of Medina, and went out to conquest Makkah. And it was reclaimed into the hands of the Muslims, all because of this treaty, Hudaybiyah. A time when the Muslims thought that they had not been victorious, when the odds were quote-unquote against them. And so from this we learned quite a few lessons. Inshallah, in the second portion of the khutbah, I'm going to mention a few of these lessons and how that relates to us. How this amazing story that had transpired with the Muslims, how we can take some durus or ever, how we can take some benefits and some wisdoms from that and apply it into our lives. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I realize I'm cutting short on time, so I'm going to just give a couple of quick lessons that we can take from the story. So first and foremost, we have to realize that there are certain situations in which we seem like we don't have the upper hand, where something may have transpired with us and it looks like we got the shorter end of the stick. However, we know from this example, from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, that that's not the case. There are times in our lives where it may seem that we are a small group of people where our voices may not be heard on the main stage, but in fact, in reality, that may not be the case. And I shared this story today on purpose because we are a newer community here. We started off just this year, 2019. I had the pleasure of coming here once before during Ramadan. So we're a newer community, much smaller in number, smaller in space, but that in fact doesn't actually matter. Because we see time and again, especially from the life of the Prophet, that this, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that this does not matter. That a group of people can come from Medina, not great in number, but committed in their message, committed in their promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's all that actually matters. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that plans. They plan and Allah plans, وَمَا كَرُوا وَمَا كَرُوا اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. And Allah is the best of planners. So it's not about numbers, it's about commitment. That's number one. Number two, we see that difficulties also pay off. Now, these were people that sacrificed again and again and again and again. Their friends were tortured, they were tortured, their families were tortured, killed, waged war against, but they stayed true to their commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They stayed true. So one is that